everybody. It's Peps, and tonight we have our final 2022 season preview. And we've left second best till last, and I'm talking about the Western Bulldogs. Will 2022 be the year where the Dogs chomp down on another premiership success, or will they be running away with their tail between their legs? I don't have the answers, but I've reached out into the western part of Melbourne and I've been able to grab the amazing Luke Parker. He joined us on the show a couple of weeks ago. Luke, welcome to Lace Out.
Hey, Pep, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And it's actually nice to have you at the time. This was the actual proper time that we're supposed to do it.
Yes.
I messed up time. Hey, I've got to tell you, it has been 2 weeks into the season and we've had a few things to get this last one booked, but you're probably going to tell me, I know, but you didn't see the Western Bulldogs starting the season like they have, especially after what happened last week.
No, did not see a slower start to the season. I think I think after every offseason, every supporter of every team probably comes in thinking, okay, pretty clear issues that need to be addressed over the off-season. You know, you put your trust in coaches and your club to address them. Even thinking, even looking at the notes I made sort of 2 weeks ago before the start of the season, a lot of it remains the same, which is concerning when you're 2 weeks into a season and you're still thinking the same things you thought at the end of the season prior. Probably a good thing I didn't write my notes at the end of the exact end of last season, because they would have been much more scathing, I think, after a couple of months to get my head around it. But even looking at the first things that came to mind, looking at areas for improvement around the ground, jump out straight away. Although I think the second half against Carlton probably showed the first set of improvement that needed to happen. I think there was a definite switch flicked somewhere in there, but couldn't get it done, I think.
But you should have won that game. What did you
Should
kick in
have
the
won
last
that game.
quarter? 1-6
2
in the
goals,
last?
7.
2 goals, 7.
Yep, I actually went and checked it just before. So, as the saying goes, bad kicking is bad football, Peps.
Oh, and trust me, when J-Dog gets on in a couple of nights, he's going to be talking about bad football is bad kicking, bad everything when it comes to Port Adelaide. But yes, exactly right. When you have as many opportunities as you had on that Thursday night against Carlton, and considering how depleted your forward line is, because one of the big things I've said is that the toughest thing that you're going to have to do to win a flag is do it without a second key forward. And no matter how much the astronaut and everybody on the pod loves the Naut, you got to see him live for the first time on the grand final rematch.
Yep,
he is an absolute gun. There's a bit of love me do about him, but I tell you what, he is an absolute gun. And the problem is that they're constantly going to him, which is great, but he doesn't have that second foil, so he's always going to be having 2-3 against him. He just doesn't have enough support at ground level. I know Katie Waitman, he's still young, but outside of that, that's the small forward brigade that a lot of the other teams have. You just don't. So it puts so much pressure on the Bont and Dunkley and McRae and Treloar to kick those extra probably 4 or 5 a game that your forward Bruce and a couple of the smaller ones would be able to do.
I think
that's the biggest challenge that I see you guys having in 2022 is what are you going to do with only one major key forward, and who can you throw down there?
Absolutely. I think it's funny you mentioned the small forwards. I know I made some notes after the grand final rematch that we got pretty much nothing from the small forwards, not only in terms of goals, but rather other than sort of Waitman's one on the siren, but even in terms of pressure, like 3 tackles between them, between Vandermeer, Hannon, and Waitman, gave us 3 tackles, which is a pretty big indictment on their forward pressure. I think there was an improvement there against Carlton the week after. Like Hannon bobbed up some pretty good marks, a couple of goals. So there was an improvement there. I think, I mean, looking at it, like even again, looking at my notes from preseason, further improvement especially at centre half forward was going to be quite a big deal. How do you provide a foil or an outlet for Norton? I think at this point, I think the Dogs need to play Jamari Ugle-Hagan for the majority of the season. Just play him. I think even if he physically isn't quite there, there's nothing to lose from playing him for the majority of the season.
Just put games to him.
Uh,
Get him up. Say, listen, mate, get off
Get games
Insta.
into him.
Get
Yep.
off Insta. Get on the park and just
Specials on the
play.
park.
And,
Get the pill in your
look,
hands.
he can play. It's just going to take a bit of time for
Yeah.
him to get his feel. Oh, I don't know
When
the
he gets
last
involved, he's
key forward
excellent.
outside of Jesse Hogan, who was the last one in their first year to pretty much do something.
That's it.
So
And
you've
and
got to,
Ugle-Hagen's run into the AFL was pretty heavily affected by COVID as well, being in the final year before his draft
yep.
came around. He didn't play much football, which is going to have an impact on not only his game, but also his fitness base, which is probably why he didn't play much last year. But I think at this point, when the cupboard's starting to look pretty bare, I mean, another solution to that is playing another ruckman, which I'm not sure why Beveridge hasn't brought
Is he
in either
stubborn?
Mutton or Sweet.
Is Bevo stubborn? Because he doesn't, there were games last year. And I remember when you played the D's north of the border last year. And there was a game where Dunkley was rucking against
Yes, that is a very
Jackson at one stage. And I'm
yep,
like, what is going on here?
classic
He
Bevo. I
doesn't
think
play Martin and English. He did it in the grand final last year, but outside of that,
I think
it's
I
just
think Bevo has I would almost term it a disrespect for the ruck position. I think
yep,
which in fairness, looking at the midfield he has, and the Bulldogs midfield is quite adept at sharking opposition taps. That's one thing they've always been excellent at. So he probably has a little bit more freedom there. And when it works, it's one of those things that when it works, it seems a masterstroke because we have that extra runner or there's an extra toll. When it doesn't work, the midfield gets exposed quite heavily. As like even the last 2 weeks, Petraka got off the leash against Carlton. Cripps got off the leash, and you wonder if some of that is down to rucking, whether it's down to tagging or lack of a tag, lack of checking in the midfield positioning, any of those things. But I do think that looking at last year, the Dogs seemed at their best with two ruckmen because then you would have English either resting forward and clunking them and kicking goals, or dropping a kick back behind, one kick behind the play, being able to cut off interceptors, which would have helped greatly against, say, Ben Brown.
yep.
If we'd had sort of an extra toll in there to intercept. Uh, so I think a lot of the Dogs' issues at the moment are personnel,
And I
first and
think also
foremost.
you've also got another young bloke who's unfortunately can't get on the park because he's had a bit of surgery. Mr. Sam Darcy, like he would have been perfect at
Mm,
this particular time to go. Hey, you know what? We might not play you forward. We might throw you down at centre half back and just control that
yes,
particular area. Because Alex Keith, it's almost Aaron Norton esque, but at the other end, he has to take on the big monster,
he
which he
does. He
didn't think
does.
he would need to do. He needs some help down there as well too.
He does. I think Keith is also a little bit out of form, definitely at the moment as well. He seems to be a player who, if he was 5 centimeters taller, he'd be just an incredible. Like he'd be the perfect fullback.
Yep.
He's clearly got the kind of general brain, very good at marshalling the troops, very good at identifying when to go, when to stay out.
Yep.
But then the problem is when he's got to take on a monster that might outsize him. Sometimes he just gets beaten by size, plain and simple. I think that that's been a feature of AFL football for decades, and it's never going to go away. Ultimately, if you're giving up 5 centimeters and 10 kilos to the bloke you're playing on, they're going to beat you in. Especially when the Dogs midfield is struggling to put on pressure when they're
Yep.
turning it over in the corridor. High ball comes in, or if that player gets on the lead, you're not stopping them.
Yeah, and it
Uh,
is. You are right because if he's lighter and shorter, he needs to have another string to his bow. So he needs to be faster, or he needs to be
mm.
able to read the ball, read what's going up down the ground
I
a
think he
little bit
reads it
better.
quite well.
Yeah,
That's where I say the out of form part comes in. He did have an injury preseason that I wonder if maybe is still. He had a shin injury, a shin
yeah,
issue preseason during a practice match, which I wonder may still be hampering him through these early weeks of the season. But again,
yeah.
can't play, can't rest him because there's no one to play in his stead. Tim O'Brien should be back in this week for his
So
debut
that
in a dog jumper, which may help.
I think that's a great pickup for you guys. Like
Absolutely.
he's not a small unit. He's a young bloke. Can take a grab. We all saw that last year.
And he's a great kick too. I think when I watched some highlights after the announcement, I thought him to be quite a good kick
Yeah.
for someone who will be playing that taller intercepting role, and in Beveridge's system,
Oh,
that's
you
what he
need
wants out
him.
of his defenders. He wants
Well, yeah.
defenders that are excellent users of the pill to set up the attacks further down the ground.
Well, he is 193 centimeters. So that's going to be a
Mm.
massive help to Alex Keith, who's sitting at 197.
Yes.
So to have a couple of bit more tall timber, that just means that
Yep.
your second string defender gets to go to the third. third goes to the fourth, and it just
That's
sort
it.
of filters down a little bit, meaning that the player that you're able to work against is probably more to your capabilities than having to play one
Yes,
role up. And
absolutely.
I know it sounds easy, but it's not. There are players who are just better than others. And if anyone's ever played football, whether it's even at a suburban level or a professional level, you just know you have two people exactly the same height, etc., same weight, but they're just a skill level is one better. You
That's
can't
it.
match them. So you have to try something different. And if it's not working, you need that extra bet to come in to then get you to go back to someone who's at your level, capability wise, etc. So if
That's
you
it.
get Tim O'Brien in, uh, he's
There'll
got
be
to.
definitely a change in personnel. Like one of Cordy or Gardner would come out of the side. I think in that case,
Yep,
I would lean towards Gardner.
yep,
I think Wally, like he definitely has some physical tools. I'm not sure if, from what I've seen of him, I'm not sure if he's quite up to the standard as yet. Not saying
okay.
not writing the guy off by any means.
Oh,
You
I
know,
think you are.
okay, look, I'm trying to maintain a perspective here that he
Nah,
has
it's all
played
good. It's all
many
good. It's all
more
good.
AFL games than I have. I have played precisely 0 AFL games, and I've never been on an AFL list. So he's already kind of ahead of me in some
He's ahead of
regards.
both of us. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
he's got us covered. Like I personally would like a setup of Keith, specifically in the back half, would like a setup of Keith, O'Brien, Cordy,
Yep,
and see how that goes. 'Cause I think Cordy has a lot of value. Like Cordy was excellent against Carlton, for
yep.
example,
He was,
playing
and
in the
then
back half, and he is capable of that. He's ironically he's a premiership centre half forward, and yet you would I definitely prefer him in the back line.
yep,
But even looking at my notes, like that was another area of the ground I identified as being a possible problem is centre half back. Like Shaki had played centre half back last year, done some nice things. Even maybe Shaki rather than Cordy, maybe the go because he did train there over the off season.
what's
And
going on
Shaki's
with
got the
Shaki?
talent.
Where do you like? He's
Not
almost.
sure.
Is he going to be one of these players that's going to play really well at a VFL level, just cannot find a spot or just cannot bring it to to that AFL, to the AFL color? We saw him take out Alia in a prelim last year,
Mm,
which was astonishing the way he played that
mm.
game.
He was in
And then,
incredible form
and
at the
he
end of last
was,
year. I think my read on Shaki is that he needs a role to play.
yep,
Not so much maybe at a VFL level he can play his own game and he shines, but I think at AFL level he definitely needs a role to play. I think giving him a job and just a simple here's what I need you to do, here's how you achieve your goal, give him that and he'll do it. And
yep,
that's why he looked to be in such good form. I think there was a moment against Melbourne, sort of later in the piece when the Dogs were maybe it was the last roll of the dice to get back into the game. He's gathered the ball maybe 45 out from goal, and rather than try and put himself in a position to take a shot, he goes to hand it off in a really
yes,
bad
yep.
situation
They call that the
when
Ben Simmons moment.
he had a
Remember
Ben
that
Simmons
night?
moment. He
He
had
had
a
a Ben
Ben
Simmons
Simmons
moment.
moment, and I think that I obviously watching that game, I was maybe a little heightened in that I really wanted the Bulldogs to win, and it was not looking likely. However, I think I said to some friends I was there with that it highlighted a lack of instinct almost.
Mhm.
It was like that was a killer instinct moment.
Yeah.
He had to instinctively know the right call to make there. Maybe he did, and the pressure made him go another way. But ultimately, like I said, my read on Shaki is that if you give him a role to play, he seems to thrive, and that's why he had good form playing off centre half back or across half back. Whereas when he goes forward, he struggles at times.
Yep. No, that
Uh,
makes total sense.
yeah, that may be the read. I've even seen him play on a wing and do quite well. Like he's got an incredible tank for a bigger player. That's pretty well known. So
And
that's
it's
it. Maybe
almost
it's
like
just a role.
yeah, it's almost like why he did really well against Port last year in that final because he had a role. I just want you to do this. And he might
That's
be
it.
just one of those players that just needs to be told, just do this, and that's all we want you to focus on.
And that may
And
be
he'll
it.
do it.
And some players are like that. Like, some players thrive on playing a role, being given a job to do, going out there, doing their job for that 120 minutes. So other players play on instinct and are better off left to their instincts. So I think Shaki falls into that camp definitely. But yeah, ultimately, look, it's a problem that Bevo needs to solve. I think is the spine. Like my notes here are the spine. Send out like not necessarily full back and full forward because you have Norton and Keith at both
Yep.
ends, and I think that's quite settled. Probably centre half back, ruck, centre half forward are a big part of the issues plaguing the Dogs at present. English has definitely been in good form. he's definitely he's been playing quite well. Like I have no complaints about English. I think the problem is that he needs a second,
Yep.
or he needs to be the second himself.
You know what he needs? He needs a beard. He needs a tat. He
Beard
needs
of Tatton.
something. Can someone just ruffle up his hair? He's almost like too perfect when he runs out onto the field.
For a player that big, I do agree. Actually, he would do a little bit better to throw his size around a little more. I've noticed in ruck contests, I'm not sure with his rucking. I think he is too conscious of the opposition ruckman's position to actually play on the ball. That's
True.
a
Yep.
very, very oddly specific thing that was pointed out to me that I then looked at. Where whether I don't know, I wouldn't put it down to a fear of contact because I've seen him go for contested marks. He clearly doesn't mind that. I think,
Started last year. He was up forward and he was clunking.
yeah, he was clunking them. He was kicking goals. He obviously doesn't mind a bit of that. I just wonder if and it may be like it's pretty well documented about English. Yeah, he had his growth spurt quite late in
Yep.
life, like quite late as a teenager. So maybe he's still getting used to that idea that he is going to be taller than the vast percentage of ruckman that he'll ever come up against, and you may as well impose yourself in the air, especially when you're over 200 centimeters. Probably time to impose yourself in the air. So obviously ruck maybe, but maybe that's also something that's solved by
Yep.
playing Sweet or Martin. And then at centre half forward, obviously, we need a foil to Norton, which may well be Ugle Hagen. It may be that if another ruckman comes in, you have a second ruckman start at centre half forward and rotate throughout the game. There are options there. The cupboard is
Yeah.
is starting to look a little bare, but I think there are still options that Bevo hasn't tried yet.
I think it's looking bare, but you're looking in the wrong cupboard.
Maybe it.
Well,
Yep.
If I was the coach and I'm only looking by what we were saying here, I'd bring in Sweet, throw him into the rack.
I
Okay.
would be playing Sweet as
It's
well.
either him or
Yes.
Martin, right? Now, if you're going to play Martin, you have to play Sweet because when things don't go well, you're going to have to.
You're going to need that.
gonna
You're
need
going to need experience to come in and at least right the ship temporarily.
I would leave English down forward.
Yes.
I would also have the Nort doing what he does. Just Nort, you've got free
Yep.
reign. Whatever you want to do it.
Yeah.
And then I'd have Ugle Hagen as that up the ground type of leading player.
Yeah,
Just having
absolutely.
a third, at least have because at the moment, back lines are walking down and going, okay, you're on Nort, you're on Waitman.
That's it. Everyone else
That's it.
just yep.
If you walk down and go, okay, all right, someone's got to go on Norton. We need someone tall on English. Someone has to look after Waitman. Somebody has to look after because Hannon's a bit of a handful as well too. It was the same when he was at
Yes.
Melbourne. Like he's someone that's just going to have a crack every week.
He found quite a bit of form against Carlton, I thought. Like, he had
He was
obviously that
good.
fantastic grab. He had that excellent goal that he kicked. He contributed around the ground. Like, yeah, Hannon has you're right, he is a handful. He's a handful.
So at least you got 5 there where previously you had 2. So make it more difficult. And if it doesn't work, you can't say that you didn't try.
You didn't
And-
try. Yes.
And then from a backline perspective, you've got Keith down there. You've also got I forgot his name. You mentioned him before.
To come in, O'Brien or
O'Brien.
currently
Okay, so you
playing?
got 2 tall timbers there.
We'd
you
have,
have-
Keith O'Brien, one of Cordy, Gardner, Shacky.
Yep.
I
I would
would-
have a crack at maybe. Do you reckon Shaki could come off a half back line?
Well, that's the thing, I think, is if you've got O'Brien and Keith there
Yep.
doing their roles, that probably does free up Shacky a little more to play maybe as an interceptor. And Shacky is a good kick of the pill. Like, he fits that criteria. He's a good user of the football. He's typically, funnily enough, even though before we were talking about when he made a very poor decision, I thought at the end of last year, kind of playing behind the ball, he was actually a good decision maker.
Yeah.
He would find targets. He would make the right call. So one of the 3 probably ends up in that third tall role, which is essentially what we're saying, where you identify your third tall.
Then you have Bailey Dale coming
got-
off the All Australian. You've also got the other All Australian and BNF, the 5'2" Tasmanian with the flared pants, Caleb Daniel.
Yep.
Who is
South
just
South
lethal.
Australian, Caleb.
I
isn't
know,
he?
but I had to go the Booney reference.
Go,
here,
go
I
the
couldn't
booties. Yeah,
resist.
fair
I had to go
enough.
the
Actually,
Booney.
I didn't catch that in time. That's my fault.
That's all right. No, but he's from South Australia. He's got a
Yep.
lethal foot. Now you've got some
Yes.
substance. And then you've got a midfield like you don't even have to go. Oh, and I also forgot Taylor Duray down there. Down back as well, too.
Yeah, you got Doc, who was again excellent at the end of
Oh.
back end of last year. Like, the Dogs are spoiled for choice at halfback, especially where you've got Dale, Daniel, Bailey Williams, who has had an All Australian season in and of his own, and look, Williams was really, really bad and I stopped myself from saying something much worse there in the Melbourne game, where he had an AFL record 6 goals kicked off his turnovers, which is why he got dropped. But he came back in against Carlton and found some form. Straight away found some
You're
form.
entitled to have a bad night. I think that's
He
the
had a
thing. You're
bad night.
entitled
He
to have
did.
a bad night. It's just that you just can't get your quality on the ground at the moment. It's tough.
Yes. It is tough.
You've
And I think without something to kick 2 forwards, a consistent problem I'm noticing with the Dogs launching off half back
Yep.
is without, again, like we've been saying, without that second tall, without a solid centre half forward, they find themselves in situations where they have no one to kick to. And they have to either hold on to the ball for too long or handball it around, which creates opportunities for holding the ball or a turnover. And then it comes into an undersized defense where,
Yep.
the problems feed themselves. They're almost cyclical in nature at times.
But I want to focus on one thing though, because outside of all those negatives, which was taken up about the first 20 minutes of
Yeah,
we've
yeah, yeah.
spoken about,
Oh, we got out of the way.
you've got a midfield that
Oh,
once that thing is humming, very difficult to stop. And I
yes.
don't think they have been humming. They hummed for a really good portion of the first game. They
Mm,
hummed for a bit of a portion in the second game. Both those times, like you said, bad kicking is bad football. You get
yes.
4 goals up on the D's, and
And
Melbourne
then it
did their usual trick and
can't get
came
it under
back. And I
control.
shouldn't say a
Yep.
trick, but they've just got that belief, and they just got back
Yep.
to what it was so much of a mirror of the grand final, like
It was
across the board. Cracking
very
game. And then
strange.
last week, if you'd kick straight, you would have taken out. But
That's it.
you can't look down. And I know the record is 0-2 at the moment. You do have a tough one coming up this week as well, Thursday night.
Yes.
But when you have a look at this, and I'm just running through some names here. You've got Libba, you've got Treloar, you've got Crozier has actually been a really good pickup since you've brought him in.
Yes.
McRae, Hunter, the Bont. You got Josh Dunkley on there as well too. You've got, I've got a bit of a sweet spot. I think Ed Richards has been not too shabby in the first couple of weeks.
Yes, I have
He
Richards
hasn't
down
been,
as a bit of a breakout player this
he's a bit
year,
of a
I think.
breakout. You've got
Bailey Smith, who hasn't
Oh,
played
haven't
as
got
well.
Smithy. Got a really solid, deep midfield. It's just unfortunately you've got all your cards here and you're sort of flaking on the outside. You'd rather have more of an even spread,
Yes.
but
Yeah,
unfortunately you haven't been able to just through injuries and so forth.
very midfield heavy. But again, like we've identified, rucking being an issue. But I think the other one is, I think what's really jumped out of me with the midfield's problem at the moment is, and again, I'm not sure if it's a coaching issue or just a setup issue or whatever, but against Melbourne, Petrarca got off the leash. Against Carlton, Cripps got off the leash. We for whatever reason, whether it's not tagging, that might be it. Might be a pretty consistent messaging in coaching of let's play offensively in the middle. More often than not, the ball's coming out too easy. That's probably it. Unfortunately, like all those players, obviously excellent, brilliant players, an incredible midfield, but at times the ball comes out far too easily, and that's what makes me think it's more of a coaching issue.
Yeah.
Because I think like you said with the even spread, it's excellent to have Bontempelli, Delore, McRae, Libba, Hunter, even Bailey Smith, all these guys running through your midfield. But if they can't get their hands on the pill,
Yeah.
going to be largely ineffective.
It can also be that it's just unfortunately not having the talent who knows what to do down back.
Mhm.
If they're
Mhm.
not all there, you're getting people who are they're familiar with the system, but
Mm.
they're not familiar with the actual execution of that system down back. So
Yes.
they're more worried about almost, okay, am I doing the right thing rather than have I got my team around? And it is going to make it
That-
tough. So once they sort of come back and they get to gel a bit more, like your team last year, when they got to gel with each other, it's going to work.
Yes.
You've got a couple of things, though, against you, which is hard. You're the 4th oldest list in the league, which is tough.
Which is quite
But
surprising considering
I
they
thought
played
that
the
was-
youngest side in the AFL multiple times last year. Like
I-
I didn't even know that they were the 4th oldest list, which surprises me, knowing that I should have actually written down the exact weeks, but there was a couple of weeks last year where Bevo played the youngest side in the AFL.
Well, you've got 9 players, 29 or older. Now, mind you, if we drop Stephen Martin's 5-year gap between him and Taylor Giray, that's going to bring it down significantly.
Yes.
But if you have a look at some of those names, you got Giray, Keith, Key Pillar, Libba, and I'll talk about him in a moment. Josh Bruce, geez, you miss him big time, you know that.
We do miss Bruce.
Mitch Wallis, I have to ask about him.
Yep.
Jason Johannesson,
Yep.
Trelaw. Okay.
Okay.
Out of all of those,
But even then, how many? I think the thing I would point to there is I'd say how many played. So JJ's yet to play a game this
yep,
year. Martin is yet to play a game this year.
yep.
Keith
Wallace
obviously
hasn't
is.
played a game this
Wallace
year.
hasn't played a game. Bruce hasn't played a game,
Martin hasn't played a game.
and
Yep.
Martin. So I think the dog's age profile can be deceptive at times, and because it's weighted quite heavily because of Martin. One player weights like he's 35. He's
It's not
very
like the
old.
Geelong age profile.
It's not a
Trust me.
Geelong
You're
age
not. You're
profile. I think
not
is
the Geelong
not a
age
retirement home
profile
coming
yet.
out.
You've got way too few in the
Yes.
30-year-old black bracket. You probably need to times that by about 4,
Yes.
and then you're in the window.
Yes, and I
Hey,
think it does
like,
show because they do trot out a younger team, and I think there are younger players in a lot of important, not key positions in terms of the spine, but in terms of where you need players to contribute, like the small forwards. Outside of Hannon, Vandermeer and Waitman are both, I think Vandermeer is 22
yep.
and Waitman is 21, so they're
They're not
quite
young.
young.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you're right. Your
they're
Waitman's
young there.
21. Yep.
Yep,
And
Vandermeer should be
Vandermeer's
20,
23. Someone's done their
23. There you go.
research. I like
I
this.
actually, that was off the top of my head
Lukey.
too. That was a total guess. I'm going to be honest with
Well,
you
you
there.
know
That
what?
was
If
a
this was the
vague
price
like,
of
what year
right,
did
if
they
this
come
was the
in?
price is right, you have won the
Yeah,
holiday for 4 to Fiji.
excellent. Love
I've got to
that.
ask you about two though.
Yeah,
Josh
let's go.
Bruce, like
Yep. Oh, miss him.
sensational.
No.
It just sucked the fact that he's gone down. When's the sort
Yeah.
of return looking for him?
Late season.
That's
Late
late season. So
is
if you
the
get,
last I heard.
you basically just need to be in some sort of position
Need to be in a
to
position to
make
contend.
finals,
Yes,
and then bring him back. Okay.
and then bring him back.
With all your forward troubles, why can't Mitch Wallace get a game? Like, he's a favourite.
Yeah.
Jamie and I on the Lace Out podcast
Big
every
fans,
Tuesday
I
night,
know.
8 p.m. on our Facebook page, Lace Out Podcast, broadcasting live. He's a big favourite of ours. Why
Very big
can't this
fans.
guy, if you've got goal kicking issues, he was your goal kicker, leading goal kicker 2 seasons ago. How can he
Yeah.
not? Has he got photos or something?
I always wonder. I think it's tough with Wallace. I think obviously, yeah, leading goal kicker in 2020, only not that long ago in football terms, even. Kind of fell into no man's land. I think I wondered if it was always more of a like Wallace, excellent medium forward, but wasn't really giving much else. Wasn't really fitting into the midfield mix. Doesn't have a lot of pace, so can't lay a lot of pressure forward of the ball.
Yep.
But that said, when the dogs are struggling for, because I think a lot of their struggle is up forward is marking rather
Yep.
than they tend to pounce on loose balls quite well, kick a lot of goals from open play, and Wallace also an excellent set shot as well.
Yes.
Like you could trust him, which is another big problem with the Bulldogs as we saw against
Oh.
Carlton, and has been a problem for 2015. When Beveridge took over, probably before that. The Bulldogs set shot kicking has been a problem for as long as I can remember. I can't remember a time where I ever felt comfortable and safe when we're lining up for a key set shot.
Yep.
So I'm not sure. I wonder if it's more of a what can Wallace offer when he's not marking and kicking goals type situation. Look, I think, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Dogs fan that doesn't love Mitch Wallace. He's one of your he's your heart and soul kind of player. He wears number
Every
3.
club's
Like
got one. Every club's got one. But
that's quite
unfortunately, they're the
a big
ones,
thing.
heart and soul,
Mm.
only get you so far. I just think that if it's not working, why can't you try someone?
Why can't you try something different?
Listen, mate, I'm
Bevo
going
is
to play you for
stubborn.
the next 4 weeks.
He is.
Blow me out of the water, okay? So show me
Yep.
what you can do.
Here's a
Otherwise, we're
go.
going to have a conversation.
Bevo
Exactly right.
Bevo is stubborn. I think that is definitely part of my perception. And obviously love Bevo, as every Dogs fan does. But he can be stubborn at times with persisting with things that seemingly don't work. There have been times where Bevo has clowned me, where I'm like Bailey Dale is a perfect example. I didn't think he would succeed at halfback, and even said it to my friends, like, don't see it working out. And then a season later, he's an All Australian and was incredible, and I looked like quite a fool. I think I had Bailey Williams.
Quite a
written
few
off at
people
one
in the
point
Western
as
Bulldogs
well.
community did look like fools
Yeah.
if you asked them the same thing.
Yeah. I looked quite a fool. I think at one point I had Bailey Williams pretty much written off, and the next season my mates have actually called it the Luke curse, where if I ever kind of go, I don't think this guy's up to it. You could book them in for an All Australian about a year later. So hopefully Ryan Gardner comes along.
Nice.
He's got 21 games to go. We'll see. But
What's
yeah,
the worst that can happen? Exactly right.
well, yeah, that's it. But I think with Wallace, I think you're right. I think he's a guy you look at and go, maybe it's worth trying something. And there are some other great half forward flankers waiting in the wings too in the VFL side. I really like the look of Arthur Jones.
Ooh, okay. Tell us about
Uh,
Arthur Jones, because that's the first time I've even saw
so
his name, and he's got
uh,
zeros everywhere at the moment.
yep,
18 years of age, a
yep.
179, 65 pegs with an
So it
asterisk next
doesn't
to dripping
on the
wet.
stat sheet doesn't seem it. You know,
No.
look at his height, look at measurements. Does not you think? Oh, he seems like he's a bit far off. I think.
Yep.
Uh, you know, you say off season, you go to a club's pracky match, and you see a guy who you've never heard of. The club's just picked him up, and you go, "Oh, a bit of a player there." You think there's something to it. But outside of Arthur Jones, Dominic Bedendo as well, yet to play an
Yep.
AFL game and has impressed me quite a bit at VFL level. So there are options. The cupboard seems bare
Yep.
in places, but there are other places where there is a bit of freedom to try something. Riley Garcia is due back from an ACL about mid-year. Toby McLean is a huge loss, and would perfectly slot into one of those positions.
Yep.
You've got Riley West
Yeah,
hanging around
another
as
one.
well. Another
But
one who's
apparently,
shown
according to his
something.
dad, the coach doesn't like him. So
Yeah, I remember the joint Facebook account was a
not a
bit of
smart thing to
consternation.
do.
No,
No, you should never have joint accounts,
no,
social,
no.
banking, anything. I mean, you
It's
learn from that, people.
he look Riley has
Listeners.
shown something. Riley has shown something at AFL level, so he's waiting in the wing as well. So there are chances there. Um, and I think you're right. To get back to our point, you're right. I agree with you. It is probably time for Bevo to be looking at something different.
Yep.
Hopefully, he is JJ coming back into that half forward line. I think will help steady the ship
Is he
quite
a
a bit.
better? Is he like he's one of Norm Smith as a halfback
Yes,
flanker
he
though?
has, but that was 7 years ago. To
I
keep it in
know.
perspective, he's older now. I think, but he's played some great games off half forward, and
Okay,
right now that's where we need him. Like you look at
gotta be
like
it.
like we were just saying about the litany of all Australian halfback flankers at the Bulldogs. Almost too many to play in one side. When you've got Crozier, DeRay, like again to listen, Crozier, DeRay, Dale, Daniel, Williams,
Yep.
Richards. That's six.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
six AFL standard halfback flankers.
Oh,
You're
it's
not
a
going to
quarter of your
add
team. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not gonna which is a very Bevo thing, I mean, like, everyone getting a run off half back. But then you're not gonna add JJ into that mix as well. You're better off utilizing him somewhere else where he's shown something forward. A lot of pace, knows where the goals are, and it's a mature head, which is the other thing the forward line lacks, is maturity.
So is that a
Uh,
concern for you? Like normally at this particular moment in time, I'm going, what gets you excited? And I think you've told me about, a couple of the record
mm,
reaches
mm,
where they're the players that you look at. You mentioned Arthur Jones. You mentioned Dominic Benendo, the ones that you
Nintendo.
see them running around
Yep.
going, who are those kids? And you have to pull out the record to figure out
Yeah,
who they
yeah.
are. So you got a couple of upsides there.
Couple
Of
upsides.
what's the biggest concern outside of manpower? Because that's a little bit
Mm,
out of your control.
mm,
You can't really do much
mm,
about that if
mm,
but do you have a concern with play style? Do you have a bit of concern with coaching? Do you have a bit of concern with the list itself
mm.
for this year?
I think so looking at the list to go through them backwards. So the list obviously we've talked about. I think there is a definite lack of key position depth because you have like at one end you have like Keith who's quite older, you got O'Brien who's due to come on, Martin's quite old, and Bruce, all older guys, and also some of three of that four not playing at the moment, which doesn't help. But then the other end of the spectrum, you have Ugelhagen, who is obviously now just at the dawn of his career. Maybe this is the first time he gets an extended run of games.
Yep.
You have Sam Darcy, who would be, if he was ready to go, 2 years older and ready to go would be a godsend. But
Yep.
obviously, right now has just had a surgery, needs to develop and then develop into his body a little more as well to get
Yep.
to AFL level. Uh, Norton is obviously killing it, but to keep Norton in perspective, he's quite young as well,
Only 22.
22. And as the conventional wisdom with key position players go, they
Takes a
don't.
little bit longer.
It takes a little bit longer. I think Norton is somewhat of an outlier in that his first season at full back was incredible. He did quite well in our BNF, was playing full back at 18 years old, then switched forward and showed an incredible prowess for
I
that
remember
too.
that.
Still coming on. Which is a scary
I'm
thought.
gonna say
He's
from a
still coming
football
on.
perspective, Luke, he is sexy to watch.
Oh, he's
I just
fantastic,
you
isn't
could
he?
just he's the type of player that when you're seeing the ball come down, you're like, where is he?
Yeah, where is he?
Where is
What's he
he?
gonna do?
Where is
Like
he?
something's
What's he
gonna
gonna
happen
do?
here.
Exactly right,
Uh,
'cause he just flies and
mm.
he's not afraid to take his marks. That's
Nope.
the thing. And he gets quite high, but he takes them on his chest. There was one night, there was one on against the D's where he sort of dropped it in front. It was almost like a double grabber. He almost dropped it in front and then dropped it into his
And just
chest.
pulled it in.
Took it, pulled it in.
He's also
No one's
quite
been
good at
doing that
ground
since
level as
Luck.
well. His ground level play is
Oh,
super
yeah.
underrated. I think that shows his defender DNA.
Yep.
When the ball hits the deck, he swoops. I can't remember a time I've seen kind of a player that big, a key position player, be so adept when the ball hits
Oh,
the
he's a
deck to
swooper.
recover so fast.
He's a
That's that
swooper.
closing speed you get as a defender. Outside of that, obviously ruck is an issue in terms of list. Also in terms of development, looking to the future, where English is quite young and should expect to be. We hopefully, there's a bit of talk about one of the WA clubs offering him a big contract. Assuming he sticks around, you probably need to look at developing Sweet, which is why you should get a run of games. I
Ooh.
think Tom Boyd's retirement is what hurt that the most.
Oh, don't get me stuck on Boydie.
I
What a
don't
gun.
like it's
What a
been a long
gun.
time. It was a gun, but I think Boyd really was he was groomed and expected to be, instead of being just a key forward, to be a ruckman as well. If we had Boyd and English as a
Oh,
double, like as a tag team in the ruck, that'd be fantastic. But we don't, so
you don't? But
there's a problem there, and I think we are. I finally I wonder, not so much a list concern, but to go back to your kind of coaching and game style
yep.
concern, the midfield balance isn't quite right. I think there needs to be a bull. Someone like probably a Libba, probably Libba. He seems the most natural one to come into that role. But when a Petraka or a Cripps is getting off the leash, you got to send someone in there just to curtail it. Just
Yep.
to curtail it, not necessarily to go
Sorry,
hard
we don't
tag.
tag anymore though,
Yeah,
Luke.
we don't tag.
Apparently I heard today it's called a
Tagging's
cooler. They're called a cooler.
yeah.
So when they're
Tagging's gone the
hot,
way of
you cool
everything.
them down
Got to
and
cool
then
them
you go
down.
back to
Yeah. But I mean, a Libba type, right? A bit of a bull who's going to go in there, at least make it difficult, make their life difficult, win a bit of the ball themselves because Libba wins his own ball just as
yep.
much. Uh, Someone to play that role, I think, is the big one. Is I said it earlier as well. The biggest concern I still see is that the center bounces.
Yep.
That
Fair
is
enough.
going to be the difference, I think, in riding the ship and getting the dogs back to probably where they were last year or where they should be, where you'd expect they would be.
So if you had to give me a breakout, so if we
Yep.
look back at the end of the season
Yep.
and we go, you know what? I had no idea of this bloke, but if I'd listened to our season preview and Luke Parker told us about this, and I didn't believe him at the
Yep.
time, but mate, the guy, he knows his stuff. Who would you look at now saying he's going to be the breakout? Who'll be the doggies player that people are just going to go, I'm wrapped that we have him?
I had two written down for this.
Yep.
Because Richards he hasn't had an extended run of games for quite some time. Clearly got a player on our hands there.
Yeah,
I
he's
think,
good. I like him. And
yeah,
he's a straight liner too.
yeah,
He loves running.
pace,
Yeah.
just loves taking off. He's got the pace, good kick of the pill, good sense for it. I think he needs to play off halfback. He is playing off halfback
I
now,
was
which is
thinking
probably
halfback
it.
would be really good for him.
Yep. I think at the outset in his first run of games, he played more wing and half forward, which still allowed him to show off some of those tools. But I think he is very naturally suited to the halfback flank. And Ugle-Hagan is the other one
Yep.
for mine, especially now. It's right there for him. May not play every game, but it depends on how his body goes. Still quite young, and as we said, interrupted run up. Yeah, we haven't really seen a player who so obviously talented and rightfully a number one pick, but also didn't play. It wasn't so much didn't play football due to injury, but couldn't play football due to COVID shutdowns. So then also couldn't necessarily be in the programs,
Just play
couldn't be in the
him.
gym. You just got to
Just
play
play
him.
him.
If you
Just
play
play
him,
him.
he will deliver. I think he really will deliver. So
He'll
Richards and
he'll have a
Ugle-Hagan,
game. He will have one of those games
he will tear a game up
a little
sooner
bit
or
like
later.
Max King on the weekend, Fremantle
Yep.
game, kicks the four.
Yep.
They reckon that's okay. That's his breakout game.
Yep. Even
Oh, I don't know.
Norton against Richmond a couple of years ago had that
Exactly right.
exact game, Had just that game where we went, "Oh, yeah, no, he is the real deal at full forward." I think Ugle-Hagan has one of those games in him, which I would love to see. I mean,
I think
even against
everybody
Carlton,
would.
he got involved. Even early, he had that beautiful snap out of the pocket, which
Yep.
you don't see a lot from the bigger blokes. Got involved plenty. Probably should have had a couple more goals. Should have been fed one. Gave up a mark to Dunkley. Had another one where he marked it, but it was a Norton free kick, so Norton got the chocolates. Like,
Forwards
one of
aren't
those things.
greedy enough. It's too team oriented. If
Yeah.
you're in 50, ping it yourself.
I think, I think that all the
Get your
time.
name in the paper.
If you're an AFL forward, you should be able to back yourself in anywhere inside 50. That's
Exactly right.
always been my
No
thought
Ben
on that.
Simmons is needed, mate. Just have a
No,
crack.
have a
Have
go.
a crack.
Sometimes you just gotta have a crack. It's better than doing a handball chain at centre half forward, which will just end in a stoppage or a turnover anyways at times.
Handballs. I've never seen in the entire history of the game, Luke, a goal kicked via a handball.
Yeah, look, a feet over
Never.
the top kind of thing, yeah, sure, but the handballing should be done up the ground. That's where
Yep.
you to open up the play to get a kick in forward. Even if you gotta play a bit of chaos ball, even bring it to ground,
Just do
you
it.
know?
Just do it.
Sometimes that's better than nothing, but those would be my 2, Richards
Now,
and Ugle-Hagen.
now, unfortunately, as long as we like talking about the great stuff, Bevo
Yep,
will have to come down on somebody
yep,
and say, "Look, thank you for your time, but all the best for your future endeavors." Who's going
yep.
to be the breakdown, whether it's chosen or body, by the end of the season?
Alright. Look, Martin
Yep,
being and no fault is on, he's just old. 35.
needs
If
one more
if
for
he's not
200. One more for 200.
one more, so hopefully gets to 200. But I mean, look, I'd love it if he has a bit of a renaissance and suddenly plays every game and puts
Yeah.
us, through a finals run in good nick, like body doesn't break down.
Yep.
I think a couple players on the block, like Shaki is probably on
Yep.
the block a little bit. I do think Bevo rates him, but if he's not finding that form, not finding a role, that makes you wonder, is he on the block? Uh, I think Hunter, knowing coming in, Hunter seemed to be a bit out of form. He wasn't going to play initially, but I would back him to regain it.
Yep.
Obviously, I don't think he's on the block in any stretch of the imagination. That one just jumped out at me as a little bit. Oh, you kind of wouldn't expect that. Definitely not on the block, but you definitely back him to regain that.
He's a
I
BNF and premiership player. Like,
Yeah, he's fine.
he's got talent.
I hate to say it, Wallis
Yep.
is in no man's land, as we've
We'll
talked
wear
about.
black armbands if that happens, I tell you.
I it'll be a sad day for sure. Uh, Look, beyond that, I don't think
Too many?
there
You
aren't
don't
too
have
many.
many
Like,
list cloggers, do you?
we don't have a lot of
Really?
list cloggers. I
No.
think the Dogs do have a lot of players that could come in and contribute at various levels. You'd probably be looking more at that point. You'd be looking more at your record reaches, like who hasn't cracked into the side, who hasn't really gotten a game. Uh, I've made my thoughts pretty clear. But Gardner is a player I don't think personally don't rate him. Don't think he should be getting that time at the AFL level. Maybe depth. Might know the system quite well at this point, but
That's okay. He's only a
I'd
rookie,
be
so it doesn't matter.
I'd be looking there. It's a hard thing.
I know
I
it's
find that
tough. And you'll probably go to the local leagues, get paid
yeah.
2 grand a game and dominate.
Yeah, I think it's a tough thing when you talk about your own players. Like, look, at the game, when you're in the heat of it, I'm like, yep, delist him. Don't yeah. I've said that quite a few times. I'm like, nah, just delist him. I've seen enough. But then when you try and talk about it from a more analytical standpoint, you go, well, fact is they're playing AFL and I'm on a podcast. So
Now, before we get into the last couple of bits where I want to find out where you think you're going to end up at the end of the
mm,
season, then we're going to have a look at it from a holistic level from the AFL perspective. We haven't mentioned the Bont deliberately tonight because, like,
yeah, he's
I don't think there's really anything you need to say about that bloke. Like, he's your
no.
captain. He leads from the front. He almost won a GF off his own boot last year.
Yes.
There's nothing more to say about this bloke, and I think that he can win another flag or get the elusive Brownlow. It's just going to take him to that next stratosphere.
Absolutely. I think he was unlucky not to win the Brownlow last year. And outside of it being obviously being a Bulldog supporter,
Yeah,
I kind of looked at, seeing Ollie Wines when especially grabbing into that late run of games where the Dogs did lose to Port Adelaide at one point
exactly. Yep.
and Bont was pretty out of form. You kind of wonder,
Could
you
have
know,
happened.
what could have happened. Like one good game in there and he probably wins it. And then if the grand final goes a different way and the difference ends up being that run, like his run in that second quarter where the Dogs kind of got out by 4 goals and the Dogs win by 4 goals, you sort of sit there and think, well, it's
Be
probably
one
the
of the
best
best.
player in the league. I honestly thought
Go down as
he
one of
was
the best
pretty
dogs ever.
much yeah,
He's
well
almost at
I
that one. He needs one of
yeah,
those two, I think,
one of
to
those
get.
2. I said to my dad while we were watching the game, I think I just after he kicked that 3rd goal, I think I kind of turned to him and said like this is him cementing himself as the best Bulldog of all time, like hands down. If this is the story of this game, I remember after the game then saying, "It's so crazy to me that we just saw 2 of the best individual midfielder performances of all time,
In a
and they
single
happened
game.
in the same game." In
Yeah,
the same game and
it's
had such a dramatic I saw a great tweet during the Melbourne Dogs rematch, which was Melbourne and the Bulldogs are two sides that can play exceptional football, except they can't do it at the same time. For
But you
whatever
can't.
reason,
You
these
can't.
two sides play each other. Both will have exceptional patches, but they just cannot do it at the same time, like,
You
for
can't.
whatever reason.
That's just
So,
happens.
look, Bond just needs to keep doing what he's doing. Like, there's the you what could he do any differently or better? I think he seems to be carrying a bit of a niggle at the moment,
Yep.
which I noticed against where he went down into the rooms against Melbourne.
That was
Uh,
an ankle.
so I wonder if he's carrying a bit of a niggle there, but obviously
He
being
needs
the captain, they're gonna play through
and
it.
you really haven't had much of a run, have you? Because you've had
No,
a Wednesday,
a Wednesday
Thursday,
and a Thursday.
and another Thursday.
Another Thursday coming this week.
He needs a few days off, the poor boy.
Yeah, you'd think that. But look, equally, you'd obviously back him to regain his form. He'll find it. He's too good not to.
Can I ask you
So,
one last thing before we go into the league side of things?
absolutely.
When you watch Collingwood and you see
Yep.
what Patrick Lipinski's doing,
Yep. Yep.
disappointed that you never kept him,
No,
or not, or
well,
a little bit surprised by
not
what he's done
not
so far?
disappointed so much. Look, I think I think you ask any Dogs fan, we know what we had in Lipinski, and he's a great player. Uh, I think two things ended with Lipinski's move, and bearing in mind that Lipinski grew up a Bulldog supporter, was at 2016, would have been so incredibly stoked to be at the club that he went for. But uh, I think number one, Lipinski is not a fast player.
Yep.
He I think his best games were games where his body caught up to his brain almost, where like, which is a
Just
weird thing to say,
otherwise known as
right?
the Sam Frost syndrome.
Yeah, Sephiroth syndrome a little bit, but what I mean more is that, when Lipinski is decisive, because he's excellent with the pill in hand, when he's decisive, it really shows how good he is. But the other part is that Bevo's system relies on a lot of two-way running, especially in the midfield. Players coming back to help out, setting up the ground, setting up the defense around the ground. I think that
Yeah.
Lipinski maybe struggled with that at times. And also, the other thing is he may just be a casualty of the Dogs midfield. There are, you think of how many top shelf players there are in that
True.
midfield, like we listed before, hard to break in. I think the
And he
Dogs
couldn't
do
break
have
in.
he couldn't break in, and like, he's one of those guys that would get, they say he'd get a game at 17 other clubs, and he is that guy, as we're now
Yeah.
seeing. He
Yep.
absolutely will get a
And
game at
good
any
on
other
him. Good
club,
on him. Like
and good on
he's
him for
taking
doing
his
it.
opportunity
Yep,
and he's
he's
flying
running
with
with
it.
it.
But we're 2 weeks in. Let's just come
2
back in
weeks,
10
long
weeks and see if something's
seasons,
different.
long seasons.
Alrighty. Lukey baby, time to put the agates on the chopping board, my friend, because
Alright,
we are going to ask you some questions, not specifically related to the Dogs. Actually, one last question for the Dogs. Where are you going to
yeah.
place yourselves by the end of the season?
I mean, look, it's a rough start, but I don't read as much into it as I think other people would. I
Yep.
think the second half against Carlton showed that this Bulldogs team is still there, and they're still quite a good outfit. I think, look, top four is a must
Yep.
at this point. That I think is a non-negotiable KPI, if you will,
Yep.
because I think that the players and the coaches know they should have been there last year. Uh, you could go as far to say top two if they really do think that they are as good, like that good, which they obviously like.
Mm.
And I don't mean this in an
No,
insulting way, but
it doesn't sound
they
arrogant
believe
at
it.
all. It's fact.
But they believe it. The playing group, I think, truly believes, which is a
Yep.
beautiful, awesome thing. But if you truly believe it, you have to deliver on it sooner or later. So I think top four is a
Top
must.
four? Top four's a must?
Yeah,
Well, I've
not
actually
not
got you
necessarily
locked in.
saying
I've
they
still got
will.
you in for top four.
Yeah,
I,
I'd say top four. Not saying they will, but I think that they are. Look, assuming they sort out these issues, then they are that good.
well, you
I
have a
do
look at the
still believe they're
first.
that good.
The top four teams had a month less than the
Yes,
other
and
teams. Now
less preparation as well.
you've got less preparation. Get through that first month, and then you're going to get your league. You're going to get your C leagues,
Yep.
and you're going to
And
be
as
right.
we said before, with Bruce, knowing that Bruce is due back and McLean, two best 22 players being due back later in the season, being in a position to contend is
That's what
a
you want.
definite. That's what you want. The Dogs, look, the Dogs could win it from anywhere, and that I don't think that's an arrogance. That's again kind of proven fact at this point. They won it from seventh, almost won it from sixth, fifth. No,
Fifth,
sixth. No, it was
sixth.
sixth because they had the away games. So
That's right.
sixth in COVID protocols, sixth in can't
Not
leave
a
your
bad
hotel
effort.
room, have to travel. I mean, look,
Hey, look, they
I
threw everything. They threw
they threw
everything in
everything
that
at it.
grand final.
I do know. I can't remember if it was Bont or Bevo that said this, but it was kind of a secondhand thing, so I don't even know how true it is. But it was words to the effect of, looking at the grand final, it wasn't necessarily lost in the grand final. It was lost when they missed top four
Why couldn't
because
play an extra game?
it put them on that run, and then they had to travel as far as
Yep.
they did. COVID
Yep.
protocols. That's going to have an impact regardless. So, anyways, to get back to it, yeah, I think being in that position to contend is a definite. Top four is probably a pass mark at that point,
Perfect.
as they say in football.
Yep.
Uh, and like I said, they've proven that they've got that mental mettle where they can contend from just about anywhere.
And
So
grand finals aren't won in March. Let's be honest.
grand finals are not won in March. That
Grand
is
finals
that
not
is
won in
also
March.
very true.
All right, my friend. Who is going to be the premier for 2022?
Do I have to pick one?
You can pick as many as you like.
All right. I did know this question was coming, and I put down the Dogs, Brisbane, and Melbourne.
Yep.
Obviously, before the season had started, that was my sort of top three.
Yep.
That was who I
Perfect.
thought is going to be in the picture. Like who
Yep.
you could bet one of those teams is going to make the grand final, possibly two.
Yep. Perfect.
Outside of that, I mean, the premierships aren't won in March, right? But I could have said Port Adelaide will be in the window, but they don't look excellent. Carlton look fantastic, but again, it's March, and we don't have an extended run
We need a
of
body of proof,
evidence.
don't
We
we?
need a
We
body of
need,
proof.
yeah.
2 games, not a body of proof. So look, I still feel pretty comfortable backing in that sort of 3 teams that are
Perfect.
definitely in the window.
Yep. Brownlow medalist. Do you have a Brownlow medalist in mind?
Right.
And
I
then
think
another question on top of that as well.
I think a couple of weeks ago, I think I identified Max King
You did?
as a bit of a chance. Don't know how that looks now. I think, look,
Coleman, maybe.
yeah, you're thinking. I mean, look, I'd love it to be Norton, and I think he's capable. If he gets the supply, if he ends up with a foil that's going to free him up and allow him to kick those goals. I mean, in round 1, he kicked 4 on Stephen May
Yeah.
for the majority of the game. Like he's still in that
He was
picture,
awesome.
even without
Exactly. What did he kick on the weekend?
it.
2?
2.
6?
Actually, I should
Leaders on
double
that.
check that because I do have to admit I
Oh,
watched
5.
the
He's
game
actually
in.
kicked 5. Sorry. He's
They
only
got
kicked
1.
5.
So I did watch the game in drips and drabs on Thursday. I do have to admit I did the Cardinal sin
Yeah,
where I had
right.
something else on, but so there's that. Look, I think looking at especially what we know now, Harry McKay is someone you include in that picture based purely on supply
Yep.
because he gets these insane totals on supply. It comes in, he clunks him, the marks, kicks the goals. That's what your forward's got to do to win a Coleman, right?
Yes, exactly
Uh,
right.
so there's that, and outside of that, I think it starts to thin out a little. You start getting into the, or if it kind of comes off, if this happens, I mean, even Norton is kind of a case of that. So I think Coleman is a tough one this year. But you've
No,
probably got
good one.
those 3 guys coming through. Look like they're probably good for some pretty high totals. I'm actually going to check the Coleman leaderboard real quick.
I'll go for it. While you're doing that, Brownlow, the Melbourne, Brisbane, Port for the grand final or for premiers. Having a look
Nick
at
Larkey
Brownlow
is leading.
medalist, you're looking at who?
I'll
Just
say no.
double check.
Nick Larkey is leading the
Oh, yeah.
Coleman at the
6 on
moment.
the
8
weekend.
goals, 4. How many did he kick on the weekend?
6.
6. Oh, okay. Okay. 6 against
The
the
waffle.
waffle. Yeah, 6
Yep.
against the waffle. So that's probably inflated. That was a bit.
Still got to
Gunston,
kick 6. He still
4.
kicks 6.
Year 2022 sold by right. So yeah. So I mean, even looking at that, like Cripps has 5.
Hmm.
Brent Brown has 5. Norton has 5. Danaher has 6. Oh, Danaher, of course. That's the obvious one I'm forgetting.
That's the one?
Yeah, that's the other one I'd add in there. Danaher,
Alright.
obviously a chance.
Beautiful. And last thing, Brownlow medal or the AFL MVP Coaches Award? Which is more prestigious in your eyes? Or
Ooh.
has the MVP AFL coaches taken over from the Brownlow?
At the risk of being accused of bias, considering the recent winners, I have always thought the Coaches Association, or especially in the last few years, I think the Coaches Association award carries a little bit more weight, and the Players Association one as well. Being in
Yes.
that, they're seeing the game through very different eyes. They see footage that we don't ever see. They have access to camera feeds that we'll never see. They look at KPIs and stats much deeper than your average person. And I think that, like, let's be being realistic about the Brownlow. It's a midfielder's award, and it has been for decades.
It has. I think the last one we were talking about this a few weeks ago. I think the
Mm.
last one to win it was Scott Wind. I mean, the
Wines,
last
yeah.
non-genuine midfielder to win it.
Even to think of Bulldogs again, Chris Grant missed it,
Robbed.
in back-to-back years, robbed, right? Fucking Ian Collins, but, so there you go. Again, it could be accused of Dogs homerism, but I swear it's backed up by the facts there.
Yeah.
Grant probably the last one to be in the picture. But it is a midfielders award, even and like we spoke about before with Bontempelli and Wines, there are things that influence that. Do you put more weight on a number of possessions or the effectiveness of those
Oh,
possessions?
effectiveness.
Is a Bont That's the thing, but do the umpires do that? Is a Bontempelli 20 touches worth as much as a Wines 35? Probably not.
I believe they
You don't
shouldn't
know.
get the stats. That's what
It's
I
a
think.
hard thing, and umpires being based, but they are obviously quite close to stoppages. So for me, that's where I weigh in. I look at coaches' association awards and sort of the players' MVP awards as here's what the people who actually do this think is
For a
most
living.
important
Yep.
for a living. This is what they identify as the most value to a team. That said, the Brownlow is still a prestigious award.
It is.
I had Petrarca, Bontempelli, and Walsh put down as my kind of bigger contenders.
Yep.
Walsh being in there, me thinking that he doesn't have. He might get it on the back of not having a lot of competition in his side. Does that make sense? Some players,
Yeah.
but now knowing what we know,
Jack Steele's another one who's similar to that realm.
Yeah. Knowing what we know now, I did come up with these a couple of weeks ago before the season had started. Knowing what we know now, with Chera coming on quite well, I thought he might start a little slow, but he's come on. He didn't play this week, but he's come on well. Cripps is 2 games, obviously not a huge body of evidence, but Cripps is looking like he's moving better than he has for a very long time. And you're going to get play. And the crazy thing about a Brownlow, any end of season award is it's a long season, 23 weeks, or 25 weeks in total.
You don't win them in the first week.
You
don't win them in the first 2 weeks.
And things change. Some guys have their big year. The penny drops, and suddenly they're away. So, but I think Tracker and Bond are probably your big two. They're probably far and away the best 2 midfielders.
They're midfielders, and they're kicking goals. And that's a recipe for disaster for anybody else as well too. Mr. Parker, you are an absolute gun.
Thank you,
absolute star. Now, if people want to find out more about you or hear about you and the doggies, etc., can they find more about you? Whether it's podcasts, whether it's websites, whether it's Reddit, you tell me. Spruik yourself. You've got 25 words or less to spruik yourself. Let everybody know about where can I find more about Luke Parker.
If you want to know, my thoughts who I am. I'm at Stash52 on Twitter.
Yep.
I'm nobody asked for this on Instagram. As all is one word. Also, I have a podcast of my own is coming out of hiatus finally. Yep. So check out the Yarra Underground on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify. That's where you'll find me.
Well, I'll put all of those in the show notes. So if people want to find out more about you, that's where they can go to. So
yeah, over on the Yarra Underground, it's all about Australia's arts and artists, where I sit down and interview, everyone from musicians to the CEO of a theatre company, visual artists, just about not only themselves and their own art, but the beautiful culture of the city that we live in.
Can't you do?
What
cannot you do, Mr. Luke Parker? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Western Bulldogs supporters, all our Lace Outlaws, that is your 2022 Western Bulldogs season preview. I know it was a bit later than normal. Been a bit of a rough start, but I think it can only go up from there. So, before we finish up, Mr. Luke Parker, I have one question and one question only. It's simply this. How do you want your footy?
Lace out.
That's how we want the Western Bulldogs to Norton every single week.
Can dogs.
Beat
it to him. Beat him.
And everybody who's been listening to our season previews, thank you very, very much. The feedback has been outstanding, and it's because of people like Luke and all the rest of our entire group. I can't do it without you. So have a great year. Go Dogs. And remember, tune into us every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. on the Lace Out Facebook page or Spotify, iTunes podcast, Apple podcast, or your good people. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of Lace Out. Head over to iTunes and Spotify to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. And remember, join us every single Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, on our Facebook page with yours truly, Christopher Pepper, and the co-host with the most, Jamie Wallis, giving you your footy how you want it. Lace out.